Hi, Alvin De Leon here, and you are watching episode 54 of the 3-Minute Health Tip. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about loss of appetite. Now, I know if you're like me, you're thinking not having much of an appetite, it could be a good thing. It's not such a bad thing if you wanted to lose some weight. But I know that for many parents, it's actually a real cause for concern, especially when you have a child that is eating normally and then all of a sudden they don't seem to have much of an appetite, they don't want to eat, and then the whole idea of eating or meals becomes such a stressful period, not just for the child but for the mother or the parents and the entire family. And so we're going to look at this from the 5 biological laws, the knowledge particularly of the second biological law. A loss of appetite is usually indicative of a person being in the conflict active phase. If you've seen some of the earlier videos, we talked about the fact that when we have unexpected stress in our lives, unexpected conflict shocks, we enter a biological program that gets triggered, and we enter initially, the first phase is the conflict active phase, which is a stress state. And it's during this conflict active phase that emotionally we're preoccupied with that conflict, that unexpected event. Changes are happening at the brain level and at the organ level based on how we interpreted that unexpected event. And this is also when we tend to have a loss of appetite and interrupted sleep. Usually because our bodies are saying, listen, you don't have time to sleep, you don't have time to eat, you need to figure out what's going on, how are you going to resolve this unexpected event in your life. And it's also during this time that we tend to have very cold hands or cold feet. And that's a good indication that somebody's in this conflict active phase. Those of you that are dealing with children, particularly 2, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, that all of a sudden now don't want to eat, they don't seem to have much of an appetite, it's very stressful to try to get them to eat anything. One of the things that I want you to look for is if they have any cold hands and cold feet, because that's a clear sign that they're in a conflict active phase. And so again, when it comes to kids, it's not always easy, depending on their age, to ask them, what was your conflict, what happened? But as a parent, you're looking for any change in routine. Did anything happen around the time that they started to lose their appetite that was unexpected? You know, any change. And so I remember having a case of a mother that brought in her 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old that was dealing with this. And when I asked her this, she did mention that it started around the time that her parents moved back home. Her parents were visiting for about 6 months, helping her with her family. And after the 6 months were over, they moved back to where they were from. I believe it was somewhere in Africa. And during this time, her daughter started to not have much of an appetite, was fussy about eating, didn't want to eat, and it created a lot of stress. Once we pinpointed that perhaps it was just that change in routine. You know, you got to remember, for kids, a change in routine can be a stressful thing depending on the child. And once she recognized that, yes, it used to be her father and that her daughter had a real bond, her father would feed her meals all the time, and maybe having them, sorry, not the father, the parents' father, so the child's grandfather, they had a real bond. And when the grandfather left, perhaps that was a stressful time for her daughter. We made sure that she created a new environment around that she made eating not so stressful. One of the things is to make sure that her daughter was able to speak to her grandfather regularly, have Skype calls to just make her aware that he's not gone, that he's there. And again, these are just some of the subtle things that maybe you don't think about when you don't realize that that relationship created a stress, or an ending of that relationship created a stress for the child. But by doing this and then making the meals different, you know, not trying to feed her in the same areas that created stress, changing her environment. Instead of putting her in her high chair, which would cause her to be stressful right away, you know, put her try to feed her in a different part of the room. Try to feed her different food that she's not familiar with. Present her with a bottle that she doesn't have any negative association or stressful associations with. Identifying what it is that they're conflict active about, why they're stressed, what is it that changed in their routine that caused them to not have much of an appetite is important, and trying to address that. And then creating an environment that they don't have an association with eating that creates a stress for them is also helpful in allowing them to hopefully overcome this conflict, put them in resolution and healing, and increase their appetite again. So I hope those of you out there dealing with children that's fussy around eating or don't have much of an appetite, that this health tip can help you in getting to the source of the issue and hopefully allowing your child to get her appetite or his appetite back and alleviate the stress around eating in your family. Thanks again for tuning in to this health tip, and I look forward to seeing you at the next episode.